Thank you, Beth. Good morning. My name is Bob Lindahl, and it's my privilege today to be your service leader as we go on to another beautiful fall day here in Door County. Today, as a reminder of our Unitarian faith, I'd like to use words from the Premier of Manitoba, much to the pleasure of my wife, who's from Canada. His name is Wabi Canoe, and he's the Premier of Manitoba, and he is actually of Indigenous heritage. So he says, whether we're young or old, whether our skin is light or dark, whether we're a man or woman or somewhere between, we share a common humanity and all are headed for a common destiny. That should bind us together more strongly than divisions can push us apart. So as long as anything other than love governs our relationship with others, we have work to do. So that's all to say that whoever you are and wherever you are on your life journey and whoever you love, you are welcome here this morning. Our announcements, we have a tradition of asking visitors who are here to introduce themselves if they feel comfortable. They haven't been here for a little while. So do we have anybody who would like to rise and tell us who they are, where they're from? Hi.
This is my friend from Racine, Liz Hanson. She lives here in Hasdell for the last 2 years. her mom and I and her dad and my husband were good friends, and Liz was a wonderful friend of our kids. And she went to UU and actually took that sexuality course way back 30 years ago. So she's here now, and I hope that, I know you're all going to treat her warmly.
Okay, welcome. Welcome. Anyone else?
Russ and my wife Katie from that UU church in Racine.
Oh, okay. All right, good, welcome. You looked familiar to me when you stood up, and so, yeah, great. Yes,
My friend Jeff was visiting for 3 weeks. Up in Phil's Rotten already now.
Uh-huh.
See you again, Bob.
good to see you. You know, it's always good to have you here. Anyone else? Okay. So just a couple of reminders before we move on. If you have any noisemakers, please turn them off. If you need to have us adjust volume during the service, please raise your hand, and I'm sure Anna can help take care of that. And then following our service today, we'll have discussion and refreshments in our gathering room. Our talk back with Dick will convene about 15 minutes after the service is over. Now, we would like to see if you have other announcements this morning. So Terry will bring the microphone around. If you would raise your hand if you have something to say.
Morning, Hank Wolst here, and Bob, by the way, I like your shirt.
Thank you. Now, I want you to notice that Hank's is older than, it's been washed more than mine has, you can tell. Okay.
A little update on the community partners status. And to date, we've collected about $2,200, and that's through the end of August. That's not to date, that's through the end of August. And just a reminder, that goes to it goes into a pool. And at the end of the year, that pool, and the fiscal year, at the end of the fiscal year, that pool is divided amongst 3 recipients. And I think you know who they are. In fact, Sarah actually sent out something this week in an email talking about specifically some new events and so forth tied to the housing partnership. That is one of them. The other one is Northern Door Children's Center, and the other one is the Climate Change Coalition. So we've collected about $2,200, which is nice. Quite frankly, I'm a little disappointed. I think we can do better than that. I hope we can. And there are a number of ways to do it. Obviously, is the plate going around today. You can do it on online, and there's a special tab set up under the Donate Now bullet button, whatever they call that, and you can contribute there. And again, when you do contribute, it's for this pool, okay? So at the end of the year, it's going to be divided amongst those 3 beneficiaries. You cannot assign it to a specific recipient. You can't say, I want to give all of my pledge or all of my special donation to Climate Change Coalition, for example. But let me remind you that if you go ahead and want to support the Climate Change Coalition, make a contribution anyway, because 1/3 of X is more than 100% of 0. So, okay? So with regard to, I won't repeat what Sarah's already sent, but I did get an email this morning, in fact, from Jeff Lutzy, which is why I have to read it, because I didn't commit it to memory. And he gave me some indication as to some events which we will then report in the e-blast. And there's a planet potluck and boreal forest discussion with Dr. Lee Freilich coming up on 9/20 at the Crossroads. Bring a dish and free trees. There's a boreal forest woods walk on 9/21, again with Lee Freilich at the Door Bluff Headlands, limited availability. There's a community solar forum October 3rd at Muse in Sturgeon Bay. Gives you the benefit of both going to the forum and also seeing this wonderful new building in Sturgeon Bay called Muse. And there's a big public tree planting, 10/16. And then there are, of course, the farmers markets. And they actually have an exhibit at the Jacksonport Farmers Market, a table. And they also do, not every Sunday at Bailey's Harbor, but they do some. And they can use volunteers to help man those booths, by the way. And so if you're so inclined, we'll give you a mechanism by which you can get in touch with Jeff and let him know that you want to volunteer to man the booth, and that would be absolutely fantastic. So more information to come on all of that. But again, thank you for your efforts. Remember, today's the third Sunday, isn't it? I believe it is.
Mhm.
So be generous with your funds, and it all goes to 3 very good organizations. Thanks, Terry. By the way, my Volkswagen won first prize yesterday at the Bailey's Harbor Car Show. I had to get that in.
Okay. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mark
Yeah.
Richards. I'm just going to follow right up on what Hank was talking about, because on September 28th, we are going to host the Climate Justice Revival here at UUFDC. The Climate Justice Revival is a program that is being sponsored by the Side with Love folks. They are we're going to be doing this in 325 congregations across the nation. Okay, so this will consist of a 4-hour workshop on Saturday, and then Jeff Lutzy is going to be our speaker on Sunday. There'll be a special message from Sophia Betancourt, the president of the UUA, during the Sunday service. There will be a lot of conversation about how climate change and the work we do around climate change intersects with other forms of justice. I'll just give you a brief example of one of those ways. You're all familiar with PFAS, right? These eternal chemicals that get into our environment. Well, they were an important component of firefighting retardants, fire foams. And so the state of Wisconsin reached out to all of the fire departments in the state of Wisconsin and said, send us your PFAS and we'll take care of them for you, which is what they did. So they got trailer trucks full of PFAS and they shipped them to a landfill in Mississippi.
Mm.
Do you want to guess where that landfill exists? Do you want to get a sense? Do you want to speculate on what that county looks like, where that landfill is? Yeah, right. I'm not going to say it because you already know. That's how we intersect climate change, climate justice with other forms of justice. And this is sort of the source of the kind of conversations we'll have. We are inviting people from the community. If you know other people who are interested, we appreciate you having them come. Saturday goes from 11 to 3, and lunch is free. So please show up.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone else? Okay. Well, our speaker today, I'm getting familiar with introducing Dick Smythe as our speaker. This is my 3rd time in about 6 months or so being a service leader for Dick, and it's always a pleasure when Dick is with us to lead us a service with his message. So I won't introduce Dick in the standard way. His bio is in your bulletin, but I did ask him, what's something about you that nobody knows? And so he said that he told me that during his career with the U.S. Forest Service, that he was on business over in Pakistan, and he was asked by his hosts over there, what would you really like to do on the weekend here when we don't have meetings? And so at Dick's request, they 2 Pakistanis ushered him through the Khyber Pass personally. So that's probably not many of us can say that, right? Okay. So now we begin our service today with words from Sun Bear of the Chippewa tribe. The measure of a civilization is not how tall its buildings of concrete are, but rather how well people have learned to relate to their environment and to their fellow man. So now I'd ask you to rise if you're able, join us in singing hymn number 170, and then remain standing for our unison affirmation and doxology. People, everybody sing for our life. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing for our life. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing for our life. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing for our life. We are young and old together, and we are singing for our life. We are young and old together, and we are singing for our life. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing for our life. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing for our life. We are gay and straight together, and we are singing for our life. We are gay and straight together, and we are singing for our life. We are gentle, loving people, and we are singing for our life. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing for our life. We gather together to seek knowledge and wisdom, to explore freely the vast reaches of mind and spirit, to celebrate within a caring community those truths, ancient and modern, which give meaning and direction to our lives. From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung, and every land by every tongue. You may be seated. Now we have time for our joys and concerns. Both of our joys and our concerns remind us that we are indeed one body of care and concern and love. So if you have a joy or a concern to share, would you please raise your hand, and Terry will bring the mic around. Also remember too that this service is going online, so make sure if you mention someone's name that you have their permission and their knowledge. Okay. Anyone have a joy or a concern?
Me again. Bob, I like your shirt.
Thank you.
No, this week, my joy is that this week Buttons and I celebrated our 36th anniversary. And
all right.
so we're happy about that. And as I'm looking at Ken and Carol, he announced last week that they celebrated their 63rd anniversary. And if you combine the two, 63 and 36, you have an anniversary numeric palindrome. Think about it.
Okay. Does anyone besides Hank have another announcement?
My joy this week is my granddaughter Mara had her second child. So I now have 4 great grandchildren.
Wonderful, wonderful.
It starts with a concern and ends with a joy. My husband, Kurt, who many of you have been wonderful about asking about his health, ended up in the ER in Sturgeon Bay and then was taken to Bellin on Tuesday night. And turns out he has AFib, but they were able to find that out, do the necessary meds, and doesn't even have to do a super anticoagulant. So we're really actually grateful and very appreciative of the care he received, and just now kind of knowing what's been going on that was sort of a mystery to him. So
Okay, thank you.
Well, like you, Beth, I have a concern that turned into a joy for the last couple of weeks. My little sister, who lives in DC, Nancy, has been passing out and with no warning whatsoever, and bumped her head quite severely. Was in and out of the hospital several times. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. They finally found out she had a total heart block and her heart was stopping, and that's why she was passing out. So they put in a pacemaker this week, and she's finally home and doing much better. I'm very grateful.
This side only now.
Well, I want to announce that Judy Anderson Cloninger, who I've mentioned several weeks in a row, did pass away last Saturday. I just heard about it last Sunday, but blessedly, because the pancreatic cancer is just a beast. And then my darling granddaughter, who is a freshman in college in Washington, D.C., has mono after only 3 weeks. Do we think she's been burning that candle at both ends?
Okay. And I'm reminded too of a joy that this summer we hosted 3 of our 4 kids and their spouses up here in Door County, and also 11 out of our 12 grandchildren we hosted here in Door County. So we were very, very fortunate. Not all at the same time, unfortunately, but it would have been wonderful all at the same time, but that didn't happen that way. So we'll move on to our offertory at this time. Reminder too, as Hank has mentioned, that the open offering today goes toward our community partners. If you really want your offering today to go to your pledge, make sure it's marked that way. But also you can donate to both the community partners and for your normal giving to the fellowship online at uufdc.org. So we'll take the offering at this time. Our reading this morning, before we go into the moment of quiet, is by Chief Yellow Hawk of the Lakota Sioux tribe. And perhaps as you think of these words, perhaps they might guide some of your thought during your moment of quiet today. O great Spirit, whose voice I hear in the winds, and whose breath gives life to all the world, hear me. I come before you, one of your children. I am small and weak. I need your strength and your wisdom. Let me walk in beauty and make my eyes ever behold the red and the purple sunset. Make my hands respect the things you have made, my ears sharp to hear your voice. Make me wise so that I may know things that you have taught my people. The lesson that you have hidden in every leaf and in every rock. I seek not to be superior to my brothers, but to be able to fight my greatest enemy, which is myself. Make me ever ready to come to you with clean hands and straight eyes, so that when life fades as a fading sunset, my spirit may come to you without shame.
Good morning. I can't resist asking that we pay particular attention to the second verse that we just sang that proclaims we are a justice-seeking people. I think that's a great background to what I'll be talking about. The time was June 2023. The place was the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe Community Gym in Minnesota. One after another, the survivors rose, shaking, often in tears. Some singing or chanting. They were sharing their stories of childhood horror at Indian boarding schools, so-called. Sitting with them was Deb Haaland, the first Native person to serve as a Secretary Cabinet. She leads the Department of the Interior. Curiously enough, the same department that oversees not only a fifth of U.S. land, but also oversaw the forcible removal of thousands and thousands and thousands of indigenous people from their lands. The Interior Secretary replied, "I will grieve with you. I will weep with you. I will feel your pain as we mourn what was lost." The Secretary, whose brief picture you have in your program, keeps her hair long, true to indigenous custom. And for her, native jewelry is a constant. Her office doubles as a gallery of indigenous art and indigenous artifacts. I can't resist a comparison. the Trump's first Interior Secretary. I say first. He arrived at the Interior Office first day of work on a horse named Tonto and proceeded to fill that room that I just mentioned with a surfeit of taxonomy, all kind of wildlife heads mounted on the wall. In many respects, Helen possesses a biography familiar to a number of Americans. She's been a single mother who at times has been on food stamps, without housing, having to crash on friends' couches. As she put it, I know what it's like to decide between paying the rent or, buying groceries for my child. She graduated from college at age 33, 4 days before giving birth to her only child. At age 62, she still owes $40,000 in law school, grad school, and college loans. She has never owned a car. When she was asked to be Secretary of the Interior, the Biden administration had to rent her a car so she could drive to Delaware for the interview with the president-elect. Minnesota was the 7th event of her year-long Road to Healing. Now, this attempts to address the residual damage and, unfortunately, largely the unknown history of Indian boarding schools that operated in this country between 1819 and 1969. Think of that, 1969. 150 years of unmitigated horror that ended well within the lifetime of everyone in this room. And even that isn't quite right, because 9 schools were opened after 1969, beyond the time frame investigated by the Interior Department. And I have no information on those 9 schools. It may be hard to believe. On the other hand, maybe it's not hard to believe that this inhumane federal program was called, quote, the Indian Civilization Act. For a century and a half, tens of thousands of Indian children, some only 5 years old, were forcibly removed from their families. The school's primary objectives were to assimilate and, quote, civilize Native kids, to rob them of their language, to rob them of their Indian culture. Students were physically abused and worse for not speaking English, for crying, for almost anything they did. At the Tulip Reservation session in Washington State, one survivor brought a bag of implements similar to those used to beat him as a child. His bag included a belt, a razor strop, and a rope. The ongoing investigation, launched during the first year of Hallam's tenure, which was just 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, has identified more than 500 deaths in unmarked Indian graves at school sites. The estimate is at least many thousands and probably tens of thousands of Indian kids died and are buried in unmarked graves. Hallam's father, who was white, served nearly 30 years in the Marines. And the family of 6 moved many times. Her parents never discussed politics, but she was raised on the importance of public service. Her maternal grandparents, now, on the other hand, were both sent one of these schools, beginning at age 8. Her grandmother saw her father only 2 times in 5 years. Her grandfather eventually became a great linguist, an accomplished musician, an athlete, and a natural leader. During one interview, as Helen was blotting her tears, she said, "If you had a kid like that, he'd be at Harvard." They raised their family in an old boxcar, an old boxcar. No electricity, no running water, no telephone, no nothing, as Helen put it. So let's look a little more closely at these so-called boarding schools. Those schools reflected part of an effort of our federal government to wipe out native English, native languages, and cultures. And it wasn't just the government, because the government, our government, your government, often worked in partnership with churches, religious orders, and missionary groups to operate and support over 500 Indian boarding schools in 38 states. We had 11 here in Wisconsin. Government officials estimate that tens of thousands of Native children over several generations attended these schools, but nobody knows. Nobody knows the exact number. We do know that thousands, if not tens of thousands, died at these schools. Many others were sexually assaulted, physically abused, or emotionally traumatized. They were stripped of their clothes, scrubbed with lye soap. Matrons cut their hair, then used combs dumped in kerosene to kill lice, even though lice were very seldom found. Speaking their tribal language would lead to a beating. And to this day, some of these people are in the 70s and 80s, have never spoken publicly about their experiences, and in some cases have never told their wives or husbands. Grace Smith, 81, mother of 7, grandmother of 11, rose to speak. She and her brother were sent to a boarding school 100 miles away from home. She has no idea how old she was, but she guesses she was probably 6. A nun told her, "You're speaking barbarian, speak English. In boarding school, you're not even a human being." Smith said, "For years, I was not a person. My personhood was taken away." She calls the school the hell place, the hell place. And sometimes, she says, I yelled at God. Why did I have to go through this? What kind of a God are you? The boys were boarded separately from the girls, and Smith never saw her brother or cousin again. Ramona Klein, now 76, recalls her experience. She was awakened every day at 7 a.m. I'm sorry, 6 a.m. 6 a.m. She had to make her bunk bed, and she had to make it tight enough so that a coin would bounce off the bed covers. And if that didn't work, she had to redo the bed and redo it until she got it right. And then she had to do details, chores, such as cleaning bathrooms. For meals, she and the other young girls were marched to the cafeteria. Boys ate on one side, girls on the other side. They weren't allowed to talk at all to one another, and she rarely saw her siblings. Most mornings, they were served only burnt toast. Lunch and dinner was often soup or mush, a mix of cornmeal and milk. Not surprising, she was always hungry. When she and some other girls attempted to play, the matron made her kneel in a room while she was whacked with a wooden paddle called the Board of Education. As she explained it, she would hit me so hard, I'd have bruises all over my back and buttocks. But, she said, I remember thinking, you're not going to get the best of me, and I'm not going to cry. Then there was a sexual abuse by the adult son of one of the school's matrons. Donald Marconi was 87 when he testified, and he had never told his wife. They've been married for 56 years. He was taken to a school at age 8 and stayed there until he was 20. In those 12 years, he went home only 2 times. 2 times in 12 years. He described those years as 12 years of hell. On the few occasions when his parents could come to visit, they had to stay in their car, roll the windows down, while he stood on the curb. They couldn't exchange gifts, couldn't exchange money, and they couldn't touch each other. He and other boys were regularly sodomized by an older student at the school. One night, after drinking a bottle of stolen vodka, he and the other boys got up the courage to tell a matron about the abuse. And she responded, "I'll look into it." Well, later that day, the local sheriff came, got the boys, and took them to jail and threw them in a cell. They spent the night in the jail cell. The next day, the boys were brought back to the school, but in handcuffs. The jailing was to teach the boys a lesson. Keep your mouth shut. He believes Indian boarding schools should get not just an apology, but reparations, like those given to Japanese Americans for their incarceration during World War II. And I should say, we, United States, gave $20,000 to every Japanese that we incarcerate, or we put in detention cells. He concluded his testimony with these words: "I didn't think I was an animal, but they treated us like we were animals. Nothing, he said, would make me ever forget or forgive what they did to us." Listen now to a more personal, detailed account from a woman. She was named Dora Brought Plenty. The 2 men in black suits and ties arrived with no warning. Arrived at her school with no warning. She was orphaned at age of 4 when her mother was murdered. And she'd been living with her grandparents on the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation in South Dakota and attending a nearby school. Then one day in 1956, get the date, 1956, 2 white men showed up and spoke to her teacher. The teacher pointed at me, remembered Bart Plenty. The 2 men came toward me, grabbed me by my little arms, jerked me up from the desk, hauled me out the door, threw me into the back of a car, and drove away. She never had the chance to say goodbye to her grandparents, and she never saw her grandfather again. She was 6.5 years old when this happened to her. And she was far too terrified to ask who these men were or where they were taking her. Imagine traumatizing a little girl, 6 years old like this. The men drove her to an Indian school nearly 200 miles away from home. Once there, she was told to climb up on a stool. A matron jerked her head back and cut off her braids. She recalled, "I remember seeing my braids hit the floor." When she asked for her clothes, the matron told her, "We're going to teach you." She was taken to a dark basement with just her undershirt and panties and left for several hours. Finally, another matron came, took her to the dorm, threw a nightgown at her, and told her to go to bed. Remember now, this was 1956, for heaven's sake. The next day, she got the school uniform, a white shirt, pedal pusher pants, and saddle shoes. She was taken to a church where she was asked if she was Catholic or Episcopalian. Well, she didn't have the slightest idea what they were talking about, but she said she thought they were the same. They said, no. They put a metal cross on her hand, told her, you are Episcopalian. And then they told her, you need to go to pray for forgiveness for who you are. For who you are. She became known by her assigned number, 199. When she whispered in Lakota to another classmate, a teacher told her to put out her hands, and they smacked her knuckles with a ruler. But she had another tormenting experience. Another punishment was she was taken to a hallway. She was told to kneel, stretch out her arms with her palms up. And then several, not one, several bricks were placed in both palms. She's kneeling now, remember. She was left that way for several hours. They beat me so bad, she said, threatening that when they finished with me, I'd never remember a single word of the Lakota language. In second grade, one of her friends, Lucy, ran away with another girl. They were caught and brought back. After they returned, the matron rang a bell. She ordered all the girls in the dorm to get out of bed. She told them to go to the washroom, get your towels, whatever was hot water as you can stand. Don't wring it out. Stick open safety pins in it. Form two lines facing each other, and the two runaways walked down this row of girls, being smacked with hot towels and safety pins. Now, this was her recollection of that. When Lucy got to me, she looked at me eye to eye. I couldn't hit her. She was my friend. All I could do was just stare at her. A matron grabbed her, ripped off her nightgown, pushed her into the gauntlet, and then she joined Lucy, being beaten by the other kids. As an adult for many years, she went to work as an HIV educator and teaching library art and library sciences at elementary schools in the Dallas area. She raised 4 kids and struggled constantly with bouts of depression. Sometimes she punished herself by isolating her from her family. She stopped taking showers and flashed back to years at the school. She said, there, when we took a shower, matrons would jerk back the curtains, look at you, and call you nasty names. Quote, you damn dirty Indians, and only allowed us to shower 1 time a week. She tried to get help. And at 13, she went to a doctor and said she kept wanting to hurt herself. The doctor said, that's nonsense. That was the end of that consultation. At the age of 16, she started cutting herself, a coping habit that continued into her late 90s. I'm sorry, into her late 40s. At 21, a psychiatrist prescribed Valium that left her feeling zoned out. She attempted suicide 3 times. Recently, she started to draw and paint to show her experiences at the boarding school. And in one of her pictures, a young Indian girl is running with a nun chasing her. She is the girl. And she was wearing the white shirt that she was given at the school. As she put it, artwork allows me to heal. It's my freedom. It would be hard to conceive, it seems to me, of a program better engineered to ruin lives, decimate native families, and create what Harlan calls, and this is a devastating phrase, but the secretary calls it intergenerational trauma, which is clearly very accurate. Graduates were so inadequately trained. For example, only thing the girls were taught was how to sew and how to clean, almost guaranteeing that they would be systematically mired in poverty the rest of their lives. Depression, alcoholism, and drug addiction choked communities. Some became very poorly equipped parents. Not surprising, because many grew up as orphans without parents and as victims of sustained abuse. The road to healing remains critical. As Deb Hallner puts it, it's hard for me to think about my grandparents, how things would have been so different from them if our country, and she puts it very delicately, if our country had had an awakening much earlier. And then she says this: the collateral damage of the government's past policies is in the air, it's in the land, it's here. It's right here where we are. And if we want a healthy nation, that means healing for everyone. Now, I know this has not been easy to listen to, but this is part of our history, yours and mine. These schools represented a function of our government. And it's a story I suspect not too many of us knew very much about it. I wonder, is it too much to ask our politicians what kind of official response to this systematic horror they might support? Are any of us willing to do that?
Thank you, Dick, for your thoughtfulness and your research, as always. Our last hymn today, as I look at it now, kind of gives us some direction as to where to go from here. Let's please rise for hymn number 134. Our world is one world, it touches what affects us all. The seas that wash us round about, the clouds that cover us, the rains that fall. Our world is one world, the thoughts we think affect us all. The way we build our attitudes on love or hate we make, a bridge or wall. Our world is one world, its ways of wealth affect us all. The way we spend, the way we share, who are the rich or poor, who stand or fall. Our world is one world, just like a ship that bears us all. We fear and great make many holes, but where our hearts can hear a different call. Please be seated. Our closing words today are from another Native American, Chief Dan George. May the stars carry your sadness away. May flowers fill your heart with beauty. And may hope forever wipe away your tears. And above all, may silence make you strong.